Hi, everybody. I'm Wayne Soares. Welcome to iBerkshires.com's Veteran Spotlight, sponsored by Berkshire Bank. My guest today served his country in the United States Marine Corps from 1943 to 1946. A great pleasure to welcome to our program Lieutenant Marc Jaffe. Thank you so much for having us here, sir.
Great pleasure to be here.
And we're going to mention a little bit later on that you were in two of the most prolific battles in the history of our country, the Battle of Peleliu and the Battle of Okinawa. We'll get to that in a little bit, though, but you're a Philly guy. You grew up in Philly.
I was born in Philadelphia, November the 6th. Should I tell you? 1921.
98 years young right now.
I'll be 99 in November.
In November.
2 months from now.
You were mentioning that before we went on the air.
Right.
You go to Parris Island for basic training.
Yes.
And as you're coming, you meet a group of soldiers that's coming at you, and they said something that was unforgettable.
Well, they were, I guess, Marines, not soldiers, in Parris Island. But as the truck went by, and we were all dressed in civilian clothes, obviously, and so the shouts came, "You'll be sorry, you'll be sorry." Of course, it was too late for us to do anything about it.
You couldn't turn back.
No.
From there, you're sent to officer candidate school.
That's correct.
In Quantico.
Quantico.
Lieutenant Jaffe, tell us, what are some of the qualities that makes that school attractive? Why would they seek you out?
Well, I actually, in those days, you could enlist as someone who was going to go to officer candidate school. They needed infantry officers, line officers. So I happened to be one of them, and that's how I landed in Quantico at OCS. So I didn't have to do anything but go there and get through it, which I did.
And you went through with flying colors, obviously.
Yes, very, very tough.
So you graduate from OCS.
Yes.
And you're sent to Camp Lejeune, I believe,
Correct.
to join a replacement battalion.
Yes.
And what took part there?
Well, the 33rd Replacement Battalion was set there just in training, which involved a lot of marching and a lot of field trips out into the boondocks. But we very shortly got assigned to go overseas, which I did from San Diego. So I went from Camp Lejeune to San Diego overseas to my first.
Your first assignment, you were a forward observer.
Well, that was my first assignment, was just to wait around on New Caledonia.
Okay.
But after spending a couple of months there, which was lovely, we went to Cape Gloucester, where the 2nd Battalion of the 1st Marines was still assigned. They had attacked Cape Gloucester some months before that, and I came after most of the action was over, although we had some patrols into the jungle, but just to clean things up. But I was made the forward observer of the 81 millimeter motor platoon, which I started with there.
I mentioned at the outset, your first battle that you were in was the Battle of Peleliu.
Yes.
One of the most vicious and horrific battles, I think, in our nation's history. You were in the first wave at Peleliu. Take us through that as soon as you hit the beach, because it's just an electrifying story.
It was an amazing time, Wayne, because none of us expected to have to deal with what we had to deal with, because the Navy had been bombarding the beaches and back into the coral ridges for 2 days before then. They thought everything was going to be quiet when we went in. I was in an Amtrak, amphibious tractor, with the platoon that I was going to be joining as we went up onto the beach. And I'll never forget, after I rolled out of that Amtrak, and there were bullets going back and forth all over us, and I was probably face down in the sand for a little while anyway, and I looked up one way and the other way, and I felt like I was in a kind of a movie. I said, this can't be me. But it was me, and I got out of it, and I was very lucky because, as I recall, we had at least 26 out of the platoon that I went in with were either wounded or killed in that first half hour or so on the beach at Peleliu. But I was able to get through with my guy who was a wireman. In those days, communication from the forward observer to the mortar platoon itself was by telephone. And so I had the guy with a roll of wire, and we crawled off the beach and then went through the swamps until we reached the first day's objective, which was the airfield right there off the beach.
Now you're on the beach, and
yes.
didn't you almost get run over by a tank if you hadn't jumped?
The tank attack came a little bit later, about midway through the day, maybe in the afternoon. I don't quite remember, and we were actually still in the whole wooded area, or actually it was all ripped up by shell holes and so on, and we were fairly close to the airfield, and we saw across the airfield these little tanks running back and forth, and then they moved at us. And I tell you, when they got to the edge of the airfield where we were, it was not fun, and I leaped into a shell hole, and I think a tank passed me no further than you are from me right now, maybe couple of yards, and that was it. But they were knocked out as they got further on, and I was not hit, fortunately, and was able to go on with my wireman to do what we had to do, which was to get ready to fire mortar shells at the enemy farther along.
What's the most important thing that you learned at Peleliu? What's the most important thing for you personally that you learned?
Well, the most important thing I learned was that I was with guys that I wanted to be with, and we were trying to achieve an objective. That's what we were there for. That's what we did. And it was something that has stayed with me all these years, that the most important thing, particularly in combat, was to be part of a group, and you knew you had their back and they had your back, and that made it a lot easier.
I remember you telling me that comradeship in battle, any battle, is so vitally crucial.
There's no question about it. I mean, there are heroes who have to do things by themselves, but that's rare. It happens, and they are real heroes when they get up very close to a pillbox and toss in a grenade. But being together with guys on your left, on your right, behind you, and in front of you, you knew you were going after what you had to do. And that was really what was proven to me the second day when we were up on the ridges there, and that was a devastating time. But we were getting up there all together.
How difficult was the terrain at Peleliu?
The Peleliu was a coral island, and it was rough as hell. And of course, by the time the bombardment was over, all the vegetation was down, but there was still nothing but rock, and it was difficult to get through. And of course, the Japanese were hidden in caves. They would open up a door of the cave, roll out a artillery, and fire at us. So we were exposed, but fortunately, enough of us got through to be able to knock them out.
And they'd roll it out on tracks, right? Little tracks
yes.
that they would...
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
So you go from Peleliu to the Battle of Okinawa.
Yes.
And you assume command of, I believe, G Company?
Yes.
Yes. Take us through that a little bit.
Well, between Peleliu and Okinawa was a rest area in the Russell Islands, but that went very quickly. And we landed at Okinawa, on the, as I remember, the 1st of April in 45. And that was totally different from Peleliu because the Japanese had decided to give up the beaches and go defend the southern part of the island. So we had an easy time getting in, and for the first month. The second month and the third month was awful because it was raining, it was muddy, it was difficult to travel at all, foot or on the back of a tank. But we did. And as we moved south is when the difficulties got even worse and we suffered casualties. It was a tough time.
I remember you telling me that the conditions there with the rain were deplorable.
Yes.
And you're in your foxhole with a poncho. And what did you say to yourself then?
Well, actually, it was the first night that I took command of G Company. And I thought things were going to be easy for me then because I'd have guys helping me and so on. I was the commander of the company. I was on my own, I can tell you. And I had to dig my slit trench, pull a poncho over. It was raining. Oh, it was awful. I can remember it sitting here talking to you, Wayne. It comes back to me. And I said to myself, God damn it, or did I say, yeah, I said, God damn it, I guess. If I can get through this, I can get through anything. And I've never forgotten that.
And that served you your whole life, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's gotten me through a lot of difficult times.
What are some of the qualities, sir, of a good leader? And you certainly, you're a benchmark to those that aspire to be.
Well, I think the most important thing that a leader has to do is to pull his unit, whether it's a squad or a platoon or a company, together. And whether he is actually in front or in the middle or behind, he's still leading them because they look to him for guidance. What do I do? What do I not do? And it is that world of trying to energize guys who have a terrible, terrible job to do. And that's what leadership is. You provide an example, and also you give comfort, and you give energy. And that's what the most important qualities are.
One of the things that you had shared with me before was you have to stay focused on your overall mission. It's not like the movies where there's drama, someone goes down and you have the person that's dying in your arms or something. It has to be extremely difficult when your objective is to move forward and you have people that are falling around you and you've got to make that decision of the combat medic and who gets what and when to leave that person to move on. How difficult is that? I mean,
well, whether that's part of leadership or not is hard to say, but that focus that you talk about is essential. What's simple about it is that it's given to you from your own commander up the line, and he says, let's go after this objective. And when you have that in mind and you know what it is, then you go after it. I mean, this happened on Okinawa. I think it was the famous Hill 69 that we had to take before we moved on to the last ridge where the Japanese defenses were. And I'll never forget that day, going up Hill 69 with the bullets coming down left side of me, right side of me, but the company went up and took that objective. And it was an accomplishment. I mean, it left Japanese dead and some of us wounded, but it was done.
You shared a very powerful story with me once before. Not many people can say during the course of their lifetime that they saved another man's life.
Yes.
Talk about that, would you please?
Well, that again is something I'll never forget. It happened at Peleliu, actually, not Okinawa. But it was still something that is probably one of the most important memories I have. We were up on one of the ridges, and I was a former forward observer with the captain of E Company. I'll never forget it, Captain Gale. And he was hit by shrapnel. I was very close to him. I saw him hit on the neck, and the blood came rushing out of him, and I put my hands on his neck, held it, and started yelling for a corpsman, the medics who were helping us. And fortunately, there was one not too far away, and he came, and I was able to save that man's life.
And you saw him later on at a
I
reunion,
did.
right?
We had a reunion maybe 15, 20 years ago, and I saw Gale. He was there, and he introduced me to his wife, and he said, "This is the man, dear heart, who saved my life."
Wow.
And that was something that was important. You know, I'm not sure I ever killed anybody in combat, but I saved one man's life. And that, I think, is the most important thing I can say about actually my whole military career.
Very, very, very powerful story. You told me once before that, well, I want to preface my comments, but a lot of people that have been in heavy action like yourself, they don't like to talk about it. But you said it actually helped you to talk about what you went through.
Exactly. That always surprised me when I hear about other veterans and their families, and their family members will say, "Well, he never told me anything about it." Well, I don't mind talking about my military background, and I do, because somehow or other it relieves some of the pressure, it seems to me. And that's a reason that I think so many veterans have problems, because they keep it all down.
Sure.
I never wanted to do that. I'd be happy to go on with you for the next half hour to talk about some of my experiences.
I could listen to it for 3 hours, sir. Don't worry about it.
Don't have to go on that far. I'm not sure I can make 3 hours.
Well, 2.5 then anyways.
Okay.
But how important were the reunions for your troop? How important were they? How important were they for you to attend and see people that you had served with and you had commanded?
Well, I only was able to do that once, actually.
Okay.
But it was important. One of my friends, Bruce Watkins, who was another officer, lived down in Connecticut, and he and his family organized the whole thing for the 2nd Battalion, whoever they could get hold of, and we got together, and I still have a cap that I wear that I got at that reunion, but we didn't do a regular thing.
Now, speaking of caps, I hope we can get a
Yes.
picture of this. Explain what this is right here. Why don't you hold it up? We can
Sure.
Can we get that, guys?
This is a cap with the Marine emblem on one side and my lieutenant bars on the other, and I've had this cap, and I just realized it because there is a picture of me over here. I don't know whether the camera can get that. When we were in the rest area on Russell Islands, and I just looked at this picture again this morning. I'd forgotten totally. I'm wearing the same cap that I'm holding right here. So this is 76 years old.
Wow, and it's
That's
still
amazing.
in fabulous condition. What was the best part of your service? And I think you told me this once before as well. What was the best part of your service? I think you said being a Marine.
Yeah, well, they say once a Marine, always a Marine. And that's something special. I've never heard an Army guy say once an Army guy, always an Army guy. Once a Marine, always a Marine. We had something that was special, possibly because we started together at Paris Island, and many of us stayed together all the way through to the end, till China. I left the battalion when it was in Tientsin, China, after the Battle of Okinawa. But from the beginning to the end, there were many of the guys that I started with, that I lived with and fought with all those years. And there's no way to forget that. You know, it's part of your life.
Sure, like you said, the comradeship is just so crucial.
Exactly.
The last time I was in your home, on my way out, you actually pointed out to a beautiful plaque that you have. It's a Bronze Star that you received, and I was reading what was on there, and it I think typified what you are as a leader. It's talking about effectiveness, coolness under pressure, being able to make decisions under pressure, bravery. How does that make you? And you're not a guy, you're not a flag waver, and you're not a guy that's jumping up and everything, but you're very, very, very humble, and you're a symbol of the greatest generation. How does that make you feel, Lieutenant Marc Jaffe?
Well, I have to admit, I'm very proud of the fact that I got a Bronze Star with a V, the V being valor. I don't want to talk about myself and who I was and what I did and all that sort of thing, in the sense of building myself up. So let that go. The fact is that I lived through it. I was lucky. I was lucky to have great comrades as I went through, that I fought with. And let anybody who wants to write my story, write it. I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't want to talk too much more about it.
Well, I can say that I was honored and privileged to write about your story in a column that I did here last year. And I will say that this has been a tremendous privilege and honor for me to be in your company and to be in your beautiful home here. And I want to thank you very much on behalf of all of our Americans for your service to our great country.
Well, I thank you for thanking me. And I'm happy to say that every once in a while, as I go through Stop and Shop, somebody will say, thank you for your service.
How does that make you feel?
It made me feel good, actually. And I wish that more young people knew more about what we went through. And so if I have anything to do in the last few years that I have to go, I want to start spreading the word. I'd like to educate younger people about the experiences that we went through, that this whole nation went through, and that we can continue to go through if we stay together.
Well, thank you once again, sir, for spending time with us today.
My great pleasure, and I hope you had enjoyed it as much as I did.
I certainly have, and hope to see you again.
Good.
My guest here on iBerkshires.com's Veteran Spotlight has been Lieutenant Marc Jaffe. Served his country in the United States Marine Corps from 1943 until 1946. For Lieutenant Jaffe, I'm Wayne Soares. God bless all of our veterans, and God bless the United States of America. Make it a great day.